all of you, and I hope I can give something of some inspiration and guidance. So thinking about sustainable long-term relationships is obviously going to date me, but aside from that, I was thinking how in life in general, in relationships, sometimes you're the student, sometimes you're the teacher, sometimes you're the leader, sometimes you're the follower, sometimes you're the child or the parent or the sister or the brother, the aunt, the uncle, the mentor, sometimes you're the disciple, and sometimes you're in a guru role. So all of these relationships are very valuable, and I'd like to share just some of my own experiences, many that I've learned the hard way. Maybe I can save you guys some of the learning curve. But we talk about everybody who, if you want to be trusted, then you have to be trustworthy. And if you want to be a confidant, then you have to be confidential. And if you want to be loved, then your responsibility is to be lovable. And if you want to be dear to others, then others have to be dear to you. It always starts, it comes home with you, what kind of relationships you want and how you're showing up in the world. When we talk about we all have our own, aura, our energy, like that, and you can't fake it. You can't pretend. We've all met people who are pretentious, and they're pretentious. They're not being their authentic self. So to be in a long-term relationship, sometimes it means you have to heal your own wounds, because otherwise, in relationships, you've got a wound there and there's a surface scab and somebody rubs against your scab and the scab comes off and you're like, oh, you created this wound. It's like, no, they didn't. They just rubbed it and now your wound is exposed. So relationships mean being selfless, but without losing yourself. And actually, Genevieve Harrison said in an Instagram video I saw yesterday that I loved. She said, if we get out of tune, sometimes we have to retune ourselves. And as a musician, everyone who plays an instrument, you know about tuning, keeping your instrument tuned or it sounds off. So to be a good friend, to be a good parent, to be a good disciple, any relationship, we need to have empathy. And if someone's not a natural empath, then to develop empathy, it means there's a few ways we can develop empathy. That basically means deeply, deeply caring about the other person. And then in that relationship, it means being present. So it's not just about turning the phone off or the computer shutting the lid when you're with somebody. Being present is the act of listening, and it means having our heart open. And another thing with actually going deeper with people is to express your heart. So many times we want to say something, we want to thank somebody, express our gratitude or our appreciation or our love, and we hold back. It's such an odd thing. We think, oh, well, that was such a small thing, I don't want to embarrass them, or somehow or other, the rational mind cancels out the expression of the heart that wants to say that appreciation to the person. So every time you override the rational mind and you follow your heart and you express that to that person, it makes the relationship a bit more deep. It builds the trust a bit more. So don't hold back when you have the opportunity. Take the opportunity to express your gratitude and your love and your what you appreciate about that person every chance you get. So as far as there was one, actually it was a young boy, like maybe 13, 14 years old, many years ago, who I was mentoring. And he had a challenge in building friendships and relationships with people because he was very self-centered and abrasive and always competitive, always wanted to win, and self-absorbed. arrogant, some of those lesser qualities. And one thing I asked him, I gave him a copy of Dale Carnegie's famous book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And I said, if you want to win, you're competitive. If you want to win, here's how to win. So I gave him the book, and years later, many years later, maybe 10 years later, he was back visiting, and I got the chance to meet him again and be with him, around him for about a week. And I watched how all of his encounters with people, he was the opposite of how I had known him before. He wasn't at all self-centered. People were eager to see him, and they were asking him about his new life and his career. And instead of talking about himself, he would politely answer them, but he'd keep his answers short. And then he would just dive in with them, like, tell me about your life. Tell me what's going on with you. And I watched this conversation after conversation, day after day. And after about a week, I said to him, I said, wow, I'd love to see how you're interacting with people. Tell me about it. He said, well, that book you gave me. And he pulled it out of his backpack. And he had read it and reread it. It was highlighted, underlined, and pages were marked down. And it was like he really took it seriously, and he'd really applied it more than anyone else I've known, more than myself, about taking yourself out of the center of the conversation and learning how to talk to people in such a way that you really find out a lot about them, and that you build trust. So with relationships, I would say choose wisely. With your friend circle, let people be acquaintances for a while, and then they move kind of up into friends, and then let them be friends for a while before they become confidant, close friends. Because it's hard. Friendship, you can also end up with a broken heart. And with business partners, it's so much the same as a life partner, because there's so many things that are shared as with a business partner as your spouse or life partner. So with a business partner, vet them, find out their background, make sure they're trustworthy, get referrals. And if somebody you know and trust warns you, this happened to me. I had a very close friend who met my new business partner, and I was in that honeymoon stage. I was infatuated with her and all we were creating together. And my long-term friend said, don't trust her. And I'm like, what are you talking about? And I was so defensive, and I didn't heed his warning. And sure enough, she turned out to be very untrustworthy, and it ended up being a disaster. So, and also another very prominent relationship is spiritual master. If you choose an initiating spiritual master or a instructing spiritual master, choose wisely. And then of course with life partner, I was curious, where does the word spouse come from? Because I never liked that word. And I remember it all the way back when I was a child playing Monopoly. And it actually is a verb that means to marry or to bind oneself. And it goes all the way back to the old Latin. And nowadays, of course, it's become a noun referring to husband or wife. But who you marry is perhaps at least one of the most important decisions you'll make. And if you only want to do it one time, and it's your first time, then by all means, please don't be arrogant enough to think you've got this. Get some help, get some mentoring individually and as a couple, so that infatuation doesn't override your intelligence or good judgment. And there's a couple, in American, there's a saying that you can tell a man's character before you marry him. You want to judge a man's character by how he treats his mother, the person closest to him, usually in the world, and how he treats his dog, which my husband laughed and said, well, if he's got a dog, a devotee with a dog, you probably might not want to marry him. But we were laughing about that. But it's also just to see how someone treats those who are lesser than them, if that's who gets their aggression and their anxiety and their stress gets acted out And then with women, avoid women who are just chronically dissatisfied, because sometimes men will think, oh, I'll be the one that brings her happiness, and then, I'll be her savior kind of thing. Probably not. If somebody has that disposition of always being dissatisfied or, high maintenance, it's usually pretty tough to change that. And then Lord Krishna has his own criteria. He's very clear with his relationships. And these are some of my favorite verses in the 12th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, verse 13 and 14 and 15. And then you can read the rest of those yourself. The Krishna says, one who is not envious, but who is a kind friend to all. I'm going to put my reading glasses on for this. Who is a kind friend to all living entities, who does not think himself a proprietor, who is free from false ego and equal in both happiness and distress, who is always satisfied and engaged in devotional service with determination, and whose mind and intelligence are in agreement with me, is very dear to me. She for whom no one is put into difficulty and who is not disturbed by anxiety, who is steady in happiness and distress, is very dear to me. So, and then you can read on the rest of those verses, 16 through 20 in chapter 12, go on to describe the qualities that are very dear to Krishna. So we can aspire to develop these qualities ourselves so that we can be a good friend and be a good servant to the Lord. So another thing that helps with relationships is having a holistic lifestyle and keeping good association. So a holistic lifestyle on the spiritual perspective is the basics are your japa, your kirtan, your hearing and reading, and honoring healthy prasadam. Also the importance of exercise, so japa walking, nature walks and jogging and biking and swimming, yoga, whatever it is for you, but the importance of exercise with what it does for the brain and for the body and for one's mood. Super important. Also, pranayam, deep breathing, drinking lots and lots of good water. You will be surprised how your mood can change by making sure you're hydrated, and how much better you can feel, and how less often you succumb to diseases and just discomfort and pain if you're very well hydrated. Also, having creative pursuits is important for you. It's important with in your relationships to do things creatively together, and being self-satisfied. So, and then the opposite qualities that you want to avoid is whining, complaining, playing power games, and nagging, and criticizing, threatening, being disrespectful, which includes interrupting. So, and learning how to ask directly from your friend, your business partner, your life partner, for your needs to be met, not assuming that somebody knows, or just because you mentioned it before or you talked about it a year ago that they should definitely know what your needs are. Actually having clear communication with one another is super, super important. And I would say, there's certain things specifically with expectations and discussing what those expectations are, and also scheduling, time frame, deadlines, finances, budget, responsibilities, who's going to do what and when and how, all of that. So all of that clear communication can make a big difference. And there's, let's see how I'm doing time-wise. So I was also thinking about friendship when I was a child, there was a mantra. It was a song we used to sing. Make new friends, but keep the old. One is silver and the other's gold. So the new friends, they're compared to silver. They're shinier, they're more sparkly. But the gold friends, the old friends are even more valuable. So our oldest and our original friend is none other than Lord Shri Krishna, who's the master of all relationships. And Lord Krishna is known as Rasaraj. He's the king of all rasas. And he gives us the opportunity to have so many varieties of relationship with him. Of course, in Nectar Devotion and in Srimad Bhagavatam, they're explained as the relationship of neutrality, of servitude, of friendship, parental love, and conjugal love. And then there's also the other rasas of anger and these ones we don't hear so much, wonder, comedy, chivalry, mercy, dread, and ghastliness. So Krishna invites us to love him as our master, as our friend, as our child, and as our lover. And Krishna is the sweetest of the sweet. You know that one beautiful song, and the English is, his smile is sweet, his heart is sweet, his words are sweet, his singing is sweet, his stealing is sweet, his love sports are sweet, his cowherd boys are sweet, his cowherd girls are sweet, his flute is sweet. Everything is sweet about the emperor of sweetness. So in the material world, our relationships are often fraught with anxiety, with envy, with disappointment, and with fear. And Srila Prabhupada explains in the 4th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, the verse Vitaraga Bhaya Krodha, that we are fearful of a spiritual personal identity because our experience of relationships and of identity, of personality, has brought us so much suffering. So, but none of that applies to our developing a loving relationship with Krishna and with Krishna's devotees. So we're all extraordinarily blessed that we have the opportunity to have Sangha that is outside of material relationships. And so I thank you for the opportunity to have your Sangha. And at that, I'll stop and open it up for discussion. So thank you all very much for your attention. And I look forward to hearing from you now.
So we have a few anonymous questions actually. And obviously, so everyone, if you want to start turning on your cameras and things like that, that would be very nice. And if you want to ask in the chat, you're welcome to do that there as well. And the link for the anonymous form is at the top of the chat if you just scroll up. But the first question is it okay to be in a romantic relationship with someone who is not from ISKCON? If yes, any advice on how to deal with cultural differences?
Good question. It is possible, and I've seen it done beautifully. People from different sampradayas, different religions, different cultural backgrounds. But I would say you want to make sure and have help to make whether premarital counseling or to iron out the differences ahead of time, especially if it's a marriage that you want to have children and raise children. And I've seen this also with family members. One's vegetarian, one's not, one's vegan, one's not even, and how problematic it can become in the marriage itself, and even more so with raising children. So that's one thing. And then the other things we were talking about with cultural differences I've seen, sometimes the woman wants to be a homemaker. She wants to be a stay-at-home mom, and her husband expects her to work and pull equal weight with finances. And sometimes it's the opposite. The husband expects her to be at home with the kids and cooking and taking care of his every need, and she's a career woman. So that's also a really big consideration, that sometimes it's amazing how many things aren't discussed. They say in America, more time is spent planning the wedding than planning the marriage and the life together. So I would say, again, get help from, it doesn't have to be direct family members, because that's can be really sticky, but to have some kind of mentor help. And I mean, even online, you can find premarital counseling questionnaires to go through together, and like that, help you think of things that you're not thinking of when you're infatuated with someone. Is that enough? Or any other follow-up questions? I mean, it's a huge question, because when you're talking about different cultures and different religions and different social economic backgrounds, and yeah.
I think that should have answered it. If you have any like follow-up questions, feel free to ask. Just because they're anonymous, there's not really like a way for us to expand on them. But the next question would be, how do you know if you can trust someone as a confidant?
Well, good question. I have a training as a therapist. So if you know someone has the training and they've taken like oaths, or they're very knowledgeable, then I would say you've got a better chance. For people in just normal friend circles, I've seen that really destroy friendships so many times, that you thought the person was confidential, and then they're not, or they become angry. Like when there's a tension in the relationship, they want to get even with you by divulging your secrets to the wrong person. It's amazing. So I would say you have to be, don't do it initially. You have to test the relationship, and you have to make sure that there's a very deep friendship before you really bare your soul, or share confidences that would really hurt you if they went out to the wrong people. Test them with small things. Not test them, but actually have really heart-to-heart talks. And the other thing is, when you are sharing something that's very confidential to yourself, make sure and tell the person, please promise me, no matter what, you will never talk to anyone about this besides me. So sometimes somebody may tell you something, and because last time they told you something and said it was confidential, and this time they told you something and you didn't really think it was confidential, it didn't seem confidential, and then you happen to share it with somebody and they get really upset with you. Sometimes you're the one that they're upset with. So help the friendship along by telling them, letting them know, I don't want you to share this with anyone, So again, being really, really clear in your communication and your expectations.
Yeah, and I think someone kind of asked something that goes hand in hand with this, but I want to get initiated at some point, and I don't know which Maharaj to aspire to.
I'm seeing there, yes, How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. He actually wrote it back in the 40s and 50s, and still principles are applicable today.
Sorry, and the next question was, I want to get initiated at some point, but I don't know which Maharaj to aspire to. So I think it's kind of similar to the trust thing.
Oh, well, there are or would you say not instructions, but guidelines that Krishna gives in the scriptures. You want to find somebody, yeah, that you can trust, somebody that you have faith in, that inspires you. But again, you don't want it just to be somebody that you get infatuated with. You want to be discerning, and you want to make sure that their personal life, their behavior, their understanding of the scriptures, their attachment to Srila Prabhupada, that everything is genuine, so that it's not just based on an attraction that you have because they're charismatic, because that won't last. You want somebody who knows the absolute truth and can guide you in your spiritual life, who's sober and intelligent and personable. And it's hard because many of our initiating spiritual masters have thousands of disciples, and you're like, what are the chances of me being special or having a personal relationship? So I do see some people choosing less charismatic, less international spiritual masters so that they can have a more personal relationship and be able to go to them with questions and get their emails answered and like that. So it is a personal decision, but again, it's a decision worth having help from devotees more experienced than you and devotees who understand your nature and perhaps the nature of their godbrother, god sister who's initiating.
Yeah, that's nice. And I think that kind of answers the question perfectly. But so Shruti, actually from Chicago, Shruti Russell, asked a question in the chat. She said, "What's the number one thing you've learned from all your years of marriage? How has it brought you closer to Krishna?"
The number one thing. She's okay. How important building trust is and how important communication is. And even though those are two different things, they're very intertwined. Because without good communication, you won't build trust. And without trust, it's hard to communicate well. So that's the short, sweet answer. And the rest is 39 years long. Everything I've learned. Respect. Respect is really, really, really important. One of the main marriage teachers in the US who's done so much study on what makes a marriage last. And he says as soon as the respect breaks down, then it's like that's the foundation that everything else is built on, and the rest, everything else will disintegrate from that once the respect is compromised.
And the second part to that question was, how has it brought you closer to Krishna?
I would say being married to the sadhu I am, because he's such a sincere chanter of the holy name. Fantastic japa association, kirtan association, study scriptures, and that he's like this true Brahmin and I'm this passionate Vaishya, Kshatriya, and Sudra mix. So he's definitely helped me be more conscious of Krishna and more take more shelter of japa and kirtan and the scriptures. And also that he actually doesn't criticize anyone. Like, it's amazing. I've known him for 43 years, been married to him for 39 years. He doesn't criticize people. He doesn't play games, mind games. He doesn't, all of those things I was talking about earlier my only complaint is he's not a sense enjoyer, so I go and do fun things with my girlfriends. But So it's been good for me to learn patience and humility and tolerance and some of the other Vaishnava qualities that aren't so prominent in my nature. So yeah, I would say, yeah, it's such an important, your marriage partner is so important, because are they going to bring you closer to Krishna or take you away from Krishna? Since actually I got married quite young. I was 20 when Badahari and I got married. And the only thing on my list, the only thing I petitioned Krishna for, was somebody that would help me go back to Godhead. I was too young. I didn't have that other list of, somebody with a good career who earns good money so I can be a stay-at-home mom, and somebody who, facilitates my devotional service and who, supports my creative pursuits and all of that. I didn't have, that's good looking. None of those things were on my list. Nothing was on my list at all, except if I'm going to get married, I want it to be somebody who helps me go back to Godhead this lifetime. So that's what I got. And some of the other things were definitely been a frustration, but over the years, it's easier now that the kids are grown and I don't have the same financial responsibilities and burden I had then. So now it's much easier to enjoy the time of hearing and chanting together and singing together. So
That's really nice. So the next question is, when it comes to friendships that haven't gone so well and you still don't know why, what would you recommend to do in terms of learning from our mistakes?
Good question. Sometimes just putting some space and time between it is helpful, because that will give you more clarity. And then if the other person's the one who pulled away, then doing something special for the person and bringing them a gift, asking them to share with you what you could have done differently or why you disappointed them, or if you broke their trust, like ask them to let you know that, or call them up, invite them over for prasadam and talk to them honestly and say, again, revealing your heart, expressing your heart that I really value you as a friend, and I think I did something to hurt you, and I want to make up to you, for you, but I need you to tell me, if you can, what I did, if it's something I did or just an attitude, if it's something that's not, you can't pinpoint, but can we talk about it so that, like that. So taking that humble position, and if it's you're the one who feels hurt and you're the one pulling away, then that's when it especially is helpful to give it a little time, so that you can have the clarity and see, maybe you misunderstood. It's not always the other person's fault. So it's good to, and then, sorry, my phone was ringing. Yeah, and I was going to say, sometimes you want the help of a mentor, but not just a mutual friend, because then you don't want to put other friends in between where they have to take sides, or they're telling you what she thinks and she feels, or what he said and why he's mad. It's like, then that's exactly what you don't want to do. You don't want to make it messy by bringing other people in. But as far as a third party neutral mentor who, whether it's a mediator or somebody you trust who may be able to shed some light on it for you, that may be. And every situation's a bit different, but we have our prayer, Vanchakalpa Trubhyascha, Kripa Sindhubhya Evacha, Ditanam Bhavanebhyo, Vaishnavebhyo Namo Namaha, to offer obeisances and beg their forgiveness. Now, if they're a friend at work or school, that might not work. They're not a devotee. But asking forgiveness and doing something special for the person and opening up communication almost always works.
That's really nice. So the next question is, how can we build the bond of a guru and a disciple when aspiring for a guru?
Well, the main thing Srila Prabhupada taught us is hearing from and serving. So that's really how we develop attachment and a strong bond. It's wonderful when you get the opportunity to serve in person. Not always possible, and sometimes serving in person, we have expectations and then we get disappointed instead of it being like fulfilling those desires for that personal exchange. Sometimes we get disappointed because we didn't get what our expectations were, you know. So you have to be careful with up close and personal service and association also. Or sometimes there may be chastisement, or there may be just no attention at all, and that really can hurt. So if you're hearing regularly from the person you're aspiring to take initiation from, then that will give you a much stronger foundation, so that when you have the opportunity for personal association, you don't take everything so personally. You know, I mean, on one hand, yes, you're taking it personally, it's an exchange, but on the other hand, you just can't have these high expectations. And there's other ways to serve besides serving in person.
I think COVID's been a lot of learning how to serve, not being in person. But the next question is, how can you fix your relationship with your parents if they want to control your life and they think they know everything that's best for you?
Yes, and I think this is a cultural question. I had the opposite growing up, you guys. I didn't have parents. My mother left us when we were quite young. She had her challenges with, she was very sick with alcoholism. And my dad was working full time, and he just kind of rented an apartment for us and let us do whatever we wanted in life. He checked in every couple of weeks. So I grew up without parents for the most part. And so sometimes when I see your loving, over-controlling parents, I'm like, gee, wouldn't that have been nice? Have someone cooking for you and taking you to school and making sure you got your homework done and helping you get a good job and all of that. So that's one thing, and you probably have experienced that just growing up in America, that a lot of your American friends don't have the perks that you have, and then also they don't have the downsides. If you're already an adult, if you're, well, or close to an adult, 17, 18, 20, 23, and your parents are still overbearing and controlling, to be able to sit down with them and talk to them and just ask them or write it to them that I love you and I want you in my life, but you got to let me make some mistakes and you've got to let me grow up. Otherwise, if I have to go away to make my own mistakes and go away to grow up and be independent and have my own life, that I think would be harder for you than if I'm here. So doing some negotiating, but again, the communication, and I know it's hard if you've grown up in a way that you haven't been given your voice. You're not allowed to talk to your elders. You're not allowed to question them. You're not allowed to really reveal your mind and your heart. So, but I would say try it incrementally. Try it and don't give up. And because, you know, it's their love and that's the other thing is to understand, is because they love you so much, they want to protect you from everything they're afraid will hurt you. And every parent, every good parent has that, but that's not the best way to do a lot of things on your own. And probably a lot of your dads left home for college, maybe even changed countries, immigrated to another country to become independent. And I know it's always it's always harder for the daughters because there's more restrictions and controls that you've had because they want to protect you. You know, we all know. So, but I would say being able to talk about it and communicate it, and then also evaluate it for yourself. What are the most important things? Like, you may not get everything you want, so what's the most important thing for you to ask for first? And, or what's the thing, you've probably already been negotiating this your whole life, like, okay, what's small that I can get a yes for? And then what can I get next, and what can I get next? So I don't know if that helps, because I think amongst yourselves you've been doing this for years, but do you want to elaborate on that, Aditi, or anyone else who asked the question?
I think they wanted to see how they can like fix their relationship. So it's already strained. And how can they move past any hurt or like control that they've been feeling and try and find that middle ground?
Well, calling your parents, telling them how much you love them, telling them how much you appreciate them. There's also an American saying, but it applies, I think, for parents and kids around the world, that the older I get, the smarter my parents are. So I still do it, right? I'm turning 60 in a couple months. My dad's in his 80s. I still will call up my dad and say, Dad, you were right. He loves hearing that. And it's true, you know, about different things. It's like, you were right. And then I tell him what he was right about. Or I thank him and I tell him, again, that thing of appreciating. If you call your parents, your mom, your dad, and probably, independent of each other, and just say, I was thinking about you, Dad, today, and thinking about when you taught me this and this and how much that's helped me. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. So just those, it can be that simple. Some kind of gratitude. It doesn't have to be some big, small things, because you'll know when you're parents yourself. When you've invested 15, 20, 30 years of your life raising your kids, supporting them, helping them at every step, you have expectations, and it's subtle, it's sometimes subconscious, but you want them to you want to make sure they turned out the way you wanted them to. And it's crazy because we all separated ourselves from our parents, but there's still that attachment or that obligation, and that, especially when it comes to Krishna consciousness, that I have to deliver you from this cycle of birth and death. I have to make sure you go back to Godhead, or I've failed as a parent, and I have to make sure you have a really good career, or I failed as a parent, and I have to make sure you marry Mr. or Mrs. Perfect, or I failed you. So just do the small appreciations, the small gifts, the calling them, the visiting them when they don't ask, and you'll be able to rebuild the friendship, the relationship. When they see that you actually turned out to be a really great person, great adult, it'll get easier for them to accept you being independent, and even come to the point where they even ask for your advice on something sometimes.
I think that answers their question. The next question was, what is a universal quality a person should have in any relationship?
Kindness. Yeah. Because if you're kind, you will make friends everywhere. People will remember you. You'll attract other kind people to you. the saying, people won't remember so much about you, but they'll remember how they felt, how you made them feel. So when you show kindness to people, anywhere, everywhere, it's such a beautiful habit to develop, of always putting others first, whether it's opening the door for somebody, whether it's letting them go in front, like whether it, just this simple, random acts of kindness, every opportunity you get. When you have that kind of peripheral vision, but you're always looking for an opportunity to serve, because Krishna is in everyone's heart. It's not just about devotees, it's everywhere you go. Satsrup Maharaj he wrote it in one of his early books. He had, gotten up and pushed his way to the front of the airplane to be the first one to deplane. And the woman's next to him, she said to him, because he was in full Vaishnava dress, and she said to him, "Is it against your religion to be kind and courteous?" And that really struck him. And I always remember that too, because everywhere, we're in front of Krishna all the time, not just the deity in the temple room. So if we can start thinking like that and train ourselves to go out of our way to be kind always, so a lot of magic will happen for you in your life too. And not that you're doing it so that you get something in return, but that's just the law of reciprocity, that, not to speak of the law of karma, that when you show kindness to others, kindness comes back to you. And then people want to be around you because you create, and I can tell you, I had a business friend that I traveled with and worked with a lot. And he had the opposite nature. He had this nature, he liked to provoke people to get agitated. He actually enjoys, he's mellowed out in his old age, but 20, 30 years ago when we were working together, it was so embarrassing because it was so opposite to my nature, but he liked to provoke people. And then he would later turn it into a bit of a kind of comedy thing with them after they saw that he wasn't serious, but he really provoked them. And I was just like, why do you do that? People's lives are stressed enough. They're already on edge. Why can't you just show kindness instead? And I I know his end game, and he would get them laughing in the end, and that's all right. But for myself, I'll choose kindness every time.
I think the next question is, oh, I just clicked off of it. How do you maintain your faith if your friendships with non-devotees and atheists in your life are uncomfortable / have doubts about it?
Well, again, those may be people that are friends or acquaintances, but not close friends. And then your own, who you are, how you show up, how you do life will have an ongoing effect on them, that you're living your Krishna consciousness, that it's not just something that you pay lip service to, but it's not actually affected your heart. So again, the 6 principles of friendship in the Nectar of Instruction are applicable for non-devotees too, of giving gifts, just, giving gifts, and maybe you're not revealing your mind and confidence, your innermost mind, but you may be revealing things related to your work or your school or your personal lives or the greater world, and you may be, they may be a semi-confidential friend. So just use those same things, of making friendship. And gifts doesn't mean a package with a bow and a ribbon and all of that. Gifts can be you brought them some extra cookies that you made last night. You thought to bring them some to work today or to school, or you saw something that you liked and you forwarded it to them on social media or message or an email and said, hey, I thought you would enjoy this, or just those kind of things that people appreciate, that someone's thinking of them and is showing them, giving them time and attention and kindness. So there's all kinds of ways to be friends with somebody, and maybe they're not on your innermost circle. But and I'll tell you a story briefly. Back in the early days, well, not the early days, the early days of ISKCON, the devotees were very close friends, just tight-knit, brother and sister. And then when things got institutionalized and established with temples and ashrams and men don't ever talk to women and the Great Divide and all of that, and then we were all absorbed in service 24 hours a day, and if you weren't doing your service, you were just supposed to be chanting, and there was no friendships, there was no downtime. And that was the era that I joined in 1976. Very few friendships, and then I think 1980, so 4 years later, I was developing what we called folk program, Friends of Lord Krishna, so congregational program at the temple for cultivating Westerners who weren't going to move into the ashram. They were usually older professional people, but to help them in their spiritual life, teach them how to practice Krishna consciousness at home. And those ended up being my first real friends. I'd been like starved for friends for years, and then those ended up being my close friends, was the people I was helping on their path to Krishna, because it was my service was to make friends with them. So it was so ironic, and it wasn't really until I moved to Alachua 24 years ago when there were just so many God sisters and God brothers that I only knew a little bit but had never spent much time with. And then there was we were all working and attending the temple but not living in the temple. So then we started having our sanghas, our women's groups and the men's group and the community picnics and all the things around with the kids and all of that. And then, so many wonderful, wonderful, deep friendships with God sisters and God brothers have developed. And I'm so, so grateful. And I'm so glad that you guys have got to have this from, much earlier on to cultivate close devotee friendships, because there's nothing in the world that will take their place. And as you go through life, to have a few friends that you can call in any circumstance of life and say, hey, I need you. Or they can call you and say, hey, I need you. Because life can, there's a lot of ups and downs in life, and a lot of curveballs, things that come at you that were not planned, you don't expect. And to have deep friendships is so important. And even when you're married, you still want to have deep friendships, because one person will never have all the facets of all the, friendship is a different rasa. And Krishna's got his dear, sweet gopi friends, and he's got his dear gopa friends. He's got his parents and all his aunts and uncles, all of them who love him as their child. And then he's got all those who love him as as their master. So there's a lot of different tastes in relationships, because our Lord Krishna has all of these. And so we also we hanker for these too. Hopefully you don't have too many hidden desires for people to want to have you as their master, but you want to be the servant. Yeah, so I don't know if that answered a very long-winded answer, but
I think you definitely covered it. So the next question was, your presentation was superb and everything was so well explained. How do you develop meaningful friendships, and how do you find those with like-minded individuals and people with those qualities? Basically, this person explained that they have a fear of judgment, and how do they overcome this anxiety when talking to new people and building new friendships?
Well, every time you talk to somebody, you'll be less anxious the next time you talk to somebody. It's just what happens is our minds project and create these worry situations. Other thing, honestly, is if you're shy by nature, a bit of an introvert, to connect with somebody and just let them know, say, I'd really like to be your friend. I'm really shy. I don't even know how to, like, can, it's like, can we do something together? Can we, or, be the one to call someone up or email them, text them. I heard your generation doesn't call people. I don't know if that's true or not, but text somebody and say, hey, I would love to invite you over for lunch, or can we go out for dinner? Or um, I'm going to the kirtan at so-and-so's house. Do you want to come with me? I'll pick you up so we can have some time together before and after. So, and if that's like too daring for you, then go back to what I started to say. Just, when you're sitting next to that person at someone's house or a program or prasadam, just say, I'm really not good at making friends, and I would really like to be your friend. Can you help me? Just being that honest and that vulnerable, I dare you. I just can't imagine anyone refusing that simple request. Or, or you be the one to initiate things. Because spending time with somebody, whether it's in person, at a house, at your house, at school, at work, at a program, at a festival, that's when you start developing a friendship. And then from there, you go and do some things together. And it's like, hey, I'm looking for a running partner. I'm looking for a swimming partner. I'm looking for somebody to help me do I took on the service of making 20 DD necklaces. Do you want to help me? Whatever it is, I'm an artist and I get really lonely, and would you like to come over to my studio and paint with me? I've got the supplies. I'd love to have you come. Whatever it is, like, be creative and get out of your little box. You'd be surprised how many people are like, oh, I wanted to be your friend too, but I'm shy too, So just start asking, and don't make it complicated. I have a friend, an older friend, who she told me once, because she was a very senior Prabhupada disciple, but hadn't lived near a temple in like 15 years. And she told me once, and we had done business together, and then I always stayed in touch with her. And she told me once, she said, you are the only God sister who calls me. You're the only friend I have. You're my only connection to Krishna. And I took that responsibility pretty like, wow, if I'm your only connection to Krishna, I better give you a little more Krishna Katha and Prabhupada Katha when we talk. I better not just be, and then over the years, I was able to persuade her to move to Alachua. And now she's got a lot of old friends, and it's been very good for her. And then, but the first year was hard still. She said, there's all these devotees around and I'm lonely. So I helped her get some service at the temple and helped her become part of a women's group and helped her, and then and I still check in with her practically, at least once or twice a week. I'm always checking in with her. So sometimes you've got to be the friend. And by you being the friend, that's how you get the friendship. It's on you. So again, thinking outside of yourself and being that for somebody else. And then you get the friend.
It's really lovely. The next question is, how did you learn patience and compromise from senior devotees and through your own relationship?
I've learned it by being extraordinarily impatient and extraordinarily fiercely independent and not being good at relationships and friendships because I had a very sharp tongue and was very critical. And I was always very justified because I was such a good critic and I was in the role of a manager, both with managing Prabhupada's temple and with managing Sankirtan parties and managing businesses. So, to learn to slow down and understand other people and what their needs are, it's been a lifelong journey for me. I learned it by hurting people and by being hurt by people. And then, like I said, being around really good association, primarily my husband, who just doesn't ever get into any conflict with anyone. And I'm like, how is it that you have no enemies? You have no conflicts, you have no dramas, you have no, and it's like, well, I know how. Because, that list I said, he dearly cares about others. He's very present when he's with somebody. He's doesn't criticize, fault find. He doesn't put himself in the center. He's happy to always be on the sidelines and just serve in whatever humble way is asked of him. He doesn't create dramas, so he doesn't have to deal with dramas. And if other people have dramas, he's usually gone. You won't see him. So I've learned the hard way. And that's why when I was putting these notes together for you guys, I was thinking, yes, perhaps my 60 years can help you avoid some of what I've had to learn by doing it all wrong. Yeah. The other real training ground for me was book distribution. I did book distribution full-time for 10 years and part-time for another 10 years. So 20 years of going up to people you don't know and praying to Super Soul in their heart, to give them Krishna, to give them Prabhupada's books, continues to be very humbling and very trying. And you learn so much about people, just so much about people, to the point where I could psychically read so much. When we used to work the airports, Los Angeles airport, and I'm not kidding, you're approaching 1,000 to 2,000 people a day. Your 8-hour shift, you're interacting with that many people, and you start being able to read their body language. If they're averting your gaze with their eyes, they're going to make sure you're not going to be able to connect with them. And then others who are looking for somebody, who are looking for Krishna, or they're looking for someone to talk to. And you just, I learned so much about people and how to connect with them through all of the book distribution. And then in business, I also work with a lot of people, and I'm in a servant role with people, helping them with their health, helping them, and they're in crisis or pain. And I also became a trained hypnotherapist. So as a therapist, you also are very focused on helping the person and guiding them. So my life, my work and my service throughout my life is all added to, what would you say, smoothing down all of my rough edges and forcing me to become kinder and more patient. And raising kids, does that do it for you too? Especially my kids, because my 2 kids are even more fiercely independent and strong-willed than I am. So.
But they're also really awesome people.
Yes, that's what happens. They're artists. They're both artists, creative people. Don't like others to tell them what to do. They have to be, they can't be in a box. And I'd say that for all of you. And I know, coming back to the one question with your parents, and I think if you can help them understand how much you appreciate everything they have done for you and continue to do for you. And then also that for you to use everything, all their good advice and all of the gifts they've given you as parents. You need more. You need to be able to grow past those boundaries. You need to be able to grow and blossom. Just like a plant that's a house plant that's inside and it's root bound. It can only grow so big in that pot. If you plant it outside in the yard, then it can grow so huge and produce more. So maybe I should be doing one of these for the Sangha Initiative parents, right?
Possibly. The next question is, how can you share your mental health struggles with others if you feel ashamed and afraid they'll treat you differently?
Well, that is something you have to be careful about, because in our modern society, most people, unless they're in a field where they've been trained themselves, they don't understand mental health. It's been something that's been shielded from people, even though we're talking like, I think we're up to 30% of Americans have some form of mental health issue. And of course, everybody deals with anxiety and some amount of depression and, at some time in their life or periodically. So, but I would say the first thing is to make sure you do have the help you need, a therapist or a counselor, somebody who's trained beyond just a friend who can help you. Make sure you're getting that help that you need, and that you want, because it can make a huge difference in your own life. Because once you have that help, you won't have to be embarrassed, because you'll have a deeper understanding yourself. And then do the self-education. And when you know how far spread it is, again, you can end up being that friend to others who are secretive themselves about it and maybe aren't getting any help. And again, so when you are ready to share with your closest friends, make sure it's in the right environment and make sure that they're trusted friends and confidants, and share a little bit at a time. Don't divulge everything. See how they respond to a little bit, and so that you can make sure that they will be confidential and that they can be trusted. And also, if you have the benefit of a therapist or a counselor, they can help you with that too. They would probably have some good advice for you along those lines. And it may not be, it doesn't mean that you have to tell everybody. All of your friends, even some of your closer friends. It depends on what your issue is and how much it affects your daily life. And I'm not talking about being secretive. I'm just talking about, and I think you would get that kind of help from a therapist.
And I think we kind of went over this one, but this will be our last question so we don't run over time. But how do you avoid misunderstandings that make an impact on a relationship?
Well, communication. Don't leave anything to assumption. Always communicate, and always be happy, be grateful, be happy to be the first to say, I'm sorry. I made a mistake. I misunderstood what you meant. So the other thing is, don't be the one who's talking behind someone's back. That's the way to make sure and sever or damage a relationship that sometimes can't be repaired. So these are all really good questions. You were all very thoughtful persons.
I think that's all we have time for today, but we have a few more announcements and then I think we'll wrap up and say thank yous and stuff like that. So just so everyone's in the know, so our next session is with Kosarupa Mataji's husband, actually, Badhari Prabhu. He'll be speaking on how to connect with our scriptures. So she did speak a little bit about book distribution and the importance of that and how it helped her connect with people. So he'll be teaching us how to connect with those books. And you can stay up to date and find like all the login codes and stuff like that on our social media. And past recordings will be on our website. And we also have a newsletter that'll be coming out sometime next week. So you can keep your eye out for that. And I think that's it. Thank you so much, Coach Rumansi. This was really wonderful. And I'm sure everyone loved it. And you can check the chat. I think some people are saying thank you. But yeah, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, and I look forward to being able to be in the same room with all of you, having kirtan and hugging and sharing prasadam together. Soon, very
Nice.
soon.
Hopefully soon. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you everyone for getting on. Haribol Mate.
Haribol.